Yes.
Oh, got it.
Hey, NWSID friends, I'm Peter Spalding. I am the marketing chair for the Northwest Society of Interior Designers, and I am lucky enough to be joined today by Kate Blairstone, who does incredible patterns here in Portland. And this series, we're talking all about finding your niche as a designer. At the Northwest Society of Interior Designers, we think a lot about interior spaces and how those go together. And so a lot of our heroes are the people that have done the same things that we have done, which is figuring out how to put great objects and finishes and seating together in a room to make people want to linger and come back once they've left. But there are so many possible jobs in our industry that are a little bit further back in the process of putting a room together. And Kate, I think, has one of the coolest of those jobs. So I'm really excited to learn from her and discuss how she got into this role and where she's taking it. So Kate said she's terribly nervous. No, I'm just teasing. She's really excited. But I just want to start by saying or asking, what events led you down this path? And, that could be your education, what inspired you, where you're from. Okay, you talk now.
Okay, I'm ready. So I have a BFA in printmaking from PNCA, and but I'm definitely one of those people who's like thoroughly an enthusiast. Like that was almost arbitrary. I could have been anything. I liked everything. And that was like the faculty that was the most, amenable at the time. And I also really like, I've been into textiles forever. So I chose that, but in a fine art capacity, it like wasn't, like I was never going to become a printmaker,
Uh-huh. And why? Because
I don't know, like it just, it requires a lot of big equipment and the gallery work and the making, art school is a lot about being conceptual. And especially at the time, there was a lot of like negative attitude toward anything that was deemed decorative. So any of the things that I was interested in really were sort of like, women's work. You know what I mean? And I in fact like had to make my thesis about that. And it was like, okay, here's some Cindy Sherman to talk about that, but like it wasn't really, it just wasn't what was happening in schools then. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And it's cool that I feel like that is changing a little bit. I hope that's changing a little bit. Maybe you don't agree. I went to NYU for school, and I was in the art history department, and my roommate was in Steinhardt, the art school, and so conceptual. And one day I came home and I was talking to him about some project that I was making, because we had to do a lot of architectural models and drawings and things. And he goes, I've just realized it's so naive of me to think that I have to create anything to be an artist. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I can't identify with that. But he was so deep into the conceptual piece of it that that he just didn't feel that he needed to hone any skills. So anyway, yeah. We haven't not continued a deep friendship.
I would go the other way. I would say an artist is someone who makes art, and that the making is like inherent, but not somebody who thinks about it, but like thinks about making it. Or
yes, well, that was his point. Thinking about making it is enough. I think your work is evidence that maybe that's not the case. So are you from Portland? Are you?
I grew up in Southern California, but moved here when I was 16. Like our family moved to Portland. So I graduated from high school in Portland from Lincoln. And then left to try various other things I went to Tulane for a year. I went to WashU in St. Louis for a semester. I transferred back. I went to PSU. I'm like a adult. Yeah, I got around for sure. I'm like an adult diagnosed ADHD person. So like now that I have some perspective on all of this, like, in a lot of these questions you're going to ask me, I can sort of talk about how I took a very meandering path where a lot of it didn't really make sense until I was able to like synthesize a lot of ideas. I needed to like take in a lot of ideas before I chose something. So
yeah. I have always known very much what I want to do, but there are so many like tangentially related things that I'm constantly like talking through ideas, and I need to have some people around me that aren't talking about ideas to help me move forward. Okay, so did you like PNCA?
No.
Okay.
Like I should have gone to what's the other one called that closed? Like the Oregon College of Art and Craft. I should have gone there if I had had more like forethought. I think I just needed to choose something, and that was what was like the best type of choice. I don't think I was really ready to and also they weren't teaching like practical how to be a working artist type classes during the Clinton administration when the economy was great and all you needed was like any degree. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like so like I graduated from art school and then spent a lot of time, like I worked in a bead store all through college. And I bartended for a while and then worked in restaurants for years. And so, oddly, I think it was like some synthesis of like, I couldn't do what I do now without having worked with chefs and restaurant people. It's just
interesting.
like a direct correlation.
Yeah. Okay. I want to talk more about that because that's really exciting. And I want to make sure that I ask you all the questions that I sent you. So the next one is, what skills did you inherently have? Like maybe a natural sense of color versus ones you really had to work hard to develop. And I sort of said, it looks to me like you're running your own business as well. So what is that as natural as some of the other pieces, or have you had to really buckle down and make sense of that piece?
This might be long-winded, so I apologize.
Okay.
So like there's two parts. Like first I could say, this is the thing I actually hear the most from anyone who comments on anything I do is that, like I have a very specific sense of color. But it wasn't always there. Like I look back at my work in college and I clearly was just like slapping things. You know what I mean? Like I think I actually, I taught myself how to do that through looking at a lot of artwork from around the world, and a lot of photography. And I think I have I taught myself to notice specifically temperature as it applies to color and like light, you know what I mean? Like this cool light that we're subjected to all winter and how it affects color. And then, I just look at a lot of stuff on eBay. And I think there's like color is cultural,
Yeah.
and it comes from, specific places, like, literally in terms of how people dye materials in, local regions, and, minerals and plants that are native to places. And I think if like, once I started seeing those kinds of patterns and making those kinds of connections, my understanding of color was so much deeper than, whatever the color wheel rules are that most people are sort of given, know? And they change so much, like symbolically and based on context.
Yeah. Do you consult the color wheel rules, or is it an intuitive experience for you based on having seen and looked deeply?
I think it's helpful to name things for people. Like if they can put a label on it, you know, I just dislike labels generally. I tend to be like a sitting outside, like just outside most labels, and I just reject them altogether. But like, but I understand that they're helpful for people, you know, and
Yeah.
especially if someone's trying to understand. I'm sure you deal with this. Like, part of your job when you have a client is to educate them about what they like. Sometimes
Yeah.
people don't know what they want and they can't articulate it, you know?
Yeah. I find that it's easier to start educating by finding out what they don't like. For
Mhm.
me, anyway, they are much more ready to give
Fantastic.
those opinions.
Yeah.
I think somehow the other opinion like exposes a little bit more vulnerability, the positive opinion.
Right.
So
You're like, am I allowed to like this? Who am I
yeah,
to like this?
yeah. And I think sometimes I can initially make them fearful, like I'm gonna judge them for liking something.
Right.
Hopefully I
I
don't
was,
just walk into a room and convey that, but
I was gonna say the other side of it, like the business side, you know, first of all, I had a lot of experience running someone else's business before I tried to run my own.
okay.
You know, my husband and I both worked at BSAWS for like years, and you know, we were like the, you know, both like number two in different capacities. You know, I did like payroll and built the website, and there was all kinds of things that I learned, sort of like how to do QuickBooks and stuff like that from running someone else's, you know, operation.
Yeah,
But the thing that I really didn't have, and I think this, you know, is the experience of working like for a firm. You know what I mean? Like
yep.
any design, in any design capacity, like there's a certain methodology to like how to bring your client along and get their agreement throughout the process, like how to present information so that they, you know, like are,
To it.
yeah. I think I had some dumb luck at first of like someone telling me what they wanted, and then I would like go away for a couple months, and then I'd come back and be like, ta-da, and then they'd be like, wow, great. But then I had a couple where they were like, whoa, what? I
You know, I'm glad you're describing that because some of the easiest projects I did were my very first ones. I don't know if it was like radiating enthusiasm or what, but I didn't get much pushback.
Mhm.
And then and also I was practically free. That may have been it. But a couple projects deeper, it really got hard. Um, and I became much more cognizant of the presentation method. Um,
Right.
and sometimes I think, gosh, I wish I could go back to the very first time when I wasn't thinking about presenting at all, because maybe that was really it. It was so natural.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I think yeah, so I did this actually during the pandemic, you know, when I at the very beginning, um, when like no one was sure of anything, and pretty much like since most of my clients were restaurants anyway, I was like, there's ain't no restaurants like building new brick and mortar right this second, you
Like,
know, like.
yeah.
And so I took this class through Seth Godin's Akimbo classes,
Okay. I
um,
don't know
called,
anything about that.
oh, Seth writes these books about like marketing specifically.
Okay.
He has one about the creative process. Anyway, he's a very smart thinker.
Okay.
But they had this workshop that was called the freelancers workshop. And what I basically felt like I was lacking in my professional development was like, you know, when you work for yourself, there's no colleagues. There's like no one to ask. Like if you're learning every single thing like
Yeah.
on this steep curve that like you almost don't have time to learn from your mistakes, like in time to incorporate them the next time. It's
Yeah.
like so panicky, you know, and it takes years. And like, anyway, so it was this whole class about like, okay, what does it mean to be a freelancer? What are you trying to achieve? Like how, you know, what are the steps to being at the top of your game? And it was super useful and I highly recommend it.
Great. Okay. I'm going to rewatch this interview and remember his name by that. Actually, just tell it to me one more time.
Seth Godin.
Seth.
The Freelancers Workshop.
Okay. All right. That's great advice. Okay, so it's nice that you kind of got to learn the business piece on someone else's dime a little bit.
Yeah.
So you weren't totally terrified going out on your own. You had some sense that it was going to be fine.
Yeah, well, I also was pregnant, so it was like, I can't spend I'm miserable. I want to work for myself. I don't care. And it was a terrible, probably like irresponsible, impulsive thing to do. But it was like, once you know your life is about to change,
why not?
Fundamentally, you have permission to change everything.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And how old is your?
My boy, he's 4.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. So you have a lot of free time, is what you're saying.
A lot of free time.
Yeah. Okay. I think a lot of people have a vision of what they want to do, this weird, very specific career that they want to create for themselves, but they have zero idea about all the building blocks required to get themselves there. And from an outsider's perspective, it looks like you have climbed put those blocks in place, and you are where you want to be. Now, that's based on a beautiful product that you're putting out, like the most incredible website I've ever seen. Everybody should go check it out. But do you feel that, or what are sort of some of the signs to you that you have made the career that you were hoping to?
Well, I was going to say, like, I feel the reverse. Like well, about one of the first things you said, which was that a lot of people know about this career that they want to create. I think most people are only give themselves permission to envision things that already exist.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. That's
like, and I have to say, like, there would be no way for me to have pictured this for myself, 15 years ago, because I made this weird job up completely, like out of like it, I mean, your title of this series is apt. Like, it's a totally weird niche that I could never have foreseen. But what were the signs that I have? I mean, I guess like the main sign is that I have trust, and like that the clients now, for the most part, who seek me out, really let me do what I can do for them.
Yeah.
For the most part, they don't, like, it's my job to give them something beyond what they could envision, because I have a particular skill set that allows me to problem solve in a way that I let them know that they can't. I mean, it's not that I let them know that they can't. It's more like
they say you don't have the skills for this.
Well, I mean, that's true. It's like, if you want to tell me exactly what to do, then do it yourself. You don't need me. There's also so many people out there who do make art. Pick someone else. It's fine. I'm not offended.
Yes, I always feel that way. I've not had it happen very often, but occasionally people just hire me to, buy furniture for them. Right. And they will ask me like what I think about one piece after another. And I'm like, this isn't how we do it. Like, we're creating an environment. We're not thinking about these things as individual objects. Right. And I imagine to some extent your experience is pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
So
I definitely have a point, where I will ask them very directly, like, what I want to know is, do you trust me?
Yeah.
Like, how much interaction do you want from me? Do you want me to have to, prove myself over and over again? Are you that kind of person? Because I need to know that going in, you know?
Right. Yes. Yeah. It can be miserable. I had one question that was popping up before this one, and so I'll have to think back to what that was. But what is sort of the timeline of a project for you?
You know, I think there's I'm still trying to figure this out, because too long and I can't like wrap my mind around it. Like I've bid on projects like, you know, I mean, COVID happened, so there's that, but like 2 years ago that now I'm back talking about again. And I'm like, I don't remember what I was doing 2 years ago. Like, this is too far ahead, but like, you know, I think there's a production timeline that's kind of out of my control, but I like to leave, you know, 8 weeks at a minimum to just execute artwork. And then I really try to impress upon people the value of allowing enough time for adequate, thoughtful feedback, because people think they can rush, like they're going to rush the timeline and that all it's going to take is that 8 weeks of me making the artwork. But in reality, like it's a partnership, and your failure to deliver on the timeline impacts the delivery of, you know, also like I can't control what you do. So you're building your own, you know,
Yeah,
ability into the timeline.
absolutely. I'm working with someone right now who I love as a human being, but who I think desires greatly to convey great decisiveness. And so will make decisions immediately, which is kind of nice because I go away and I buy everything and it's time to go. But then has not really visualized it until it's going up, and then things get dicey. So it's really nice to have a collaboration where you are both at the end envisioning the same thing. So for our viewers who are not really familiar with your work, you've told us a little bit about the process, but your website really explains well how you work together with a client. So if I pick up the phone and call you, what happens?
Well, usually I like to talk face to face with people.
Okay.
It's always weird when you get on a Zoom call and the other person doesn't turn their video on. It's like,
I hate it. What are
what's
you doing?
wrong with, I got all dressed up for you.
Yeah.
Anyway, you know, what I really care about is identity. And I think that, you know, I actually think of my work as sort of brand identity in an interiors capacity. And there's a lot of crossover in terms of like, because what I make is ultimately a digital product, it has the capacity to translate in a lot of places. Like you can put my artwork on product for your business. You can use it, you know, yes, it exists as wallpaper, and that's primarily what people come to me for, but it can become, you know, your packaging, your website, your, you know, your t-shirts or whatever. And so there's a conversation that happens around, you know, what do you want it for? What do you see like, I'm going to deliver you something that has a lot of potential to speak about you in many, many, many ways. Can you, you know, do you have the foresight so that we can talk about how that can work hard for you? Like it's going to be like a thing that is so visually impactful that like it speaks for you on social media. Like, is that what you want? You know what I mean? It's singularly identifiable with you. So how am I expressing your identity to, you know, your audience? And like, not only that, but who's it for? Like, who are we making this work for? What are you about? What do you know, what are the symbols that you care about? And, you know, how do you want to represent yourself? Like, what are the things that really like, that you geek out about? Like, I want to know all that stuff.
Spiders, fish, like what?
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting. Do you ever meet somebody who like doesn't have the answers to those kinds of questions?
Yeah, I mean, I meet people who are not immediately ready to share the answers to those questions. I
Right.
think eventually they have them.
Right.
I think everybody knows, but yeah.
I mean, occasionally I meet people who just seem to have, and, you know, usually like the people that I immediately connect with are also super um like geeky
Yeah.
people. You know what I mean? Like the team at Gato Gato, like Mariah's been collecting these vintage unicorn posters since she was in high school. And like her and I are about the same age. And it's like, that's not my jam, but like I love that you're really into that. Like I'm thrilled to make work for people that are like that excited about their
Yeah.
things that
Yeah,
are
it is very fun to be with people who have a really distinct point of view and are willing to share it.
right.
I was supposed to go to Gato Gato for my birthday next week, and I don't know what's happened, but I guess we're not going now. So
Oh no,
I've never been. I'm very excited to go someday. Um, for maybe non-Portland listeners who are unfamiliar with BSAWs, can you tell them what that is? And then maybe we could take that project as an example of like the sort of the step-by-step. So after you get to know somebody,
Sure.
what
I mean,
happens?
that one's a real outlier, so I can tell you
Okay,
that, and then
we don't need to, you can pick the project. The way that I'm familiar with your work is by seeing that paper at BSAWs, and I just think the space would be very nice without it, but wouldn't be memorable in a
yeah,
way.
we so I worked there for, you know, I had been working there for 6 years or so when the old location on Northwest 23rd lost its lease. It was like the 100-year, 111-year location. And Matt and I stayed on in the transition to closing one and opening the other one. You know, along with the chef, we were the only ones on staff. And the head bartender, like there were like a handful of us.
Sounds like a really good job.
Yeah, and so we planned every aspect of that restaurant and like did it all ourselves. And so I had this unique opportunity. You know, it's like going from a tiny little 100, like there was nothing to speak of about that actual building that it was in, except for the fact that it had so much 100-year-oldness about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, but it had this great community garden that was in the block next door, or it wasn't really a community garden. It was like a vacant lot that kind of like developed into a garden space. And we had, cocktail events out there. And specifically it had this like dark maroon burgundy wall.
Uh-huh.
And I was doing like their social media, and there was something about like the kitchen garden vegetables like in the sun against this dark wall that, like I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm making this. It's gonna be awesome. So we, luckily, like again, I had a lot of trust. So I made what I wanted to make. And
Awesome.
yeah, it worked out really well. But the weird thing about it was that I worked there at the time. So it's not really, it was unlike client projects later,
not the typical.
Right. I had like a
So
7-year history.
So the actual making process, is this all digitally rendered, or how do you?
So most of my work now is drawn in ink on tissue.
Awesome.
So I kind of have a, like I said, like I have a printmaking BFA.
Yeah.
And for some reason, fast forward 10 years from my art degree, like some of those ways of doing things kind of stuck. Like I just like the sort of flat screen printed stacked layered look, and so I developed my current practice from like this 10-year-old memory of doing it.
Yeah.
And you know, you asked earlier like what things I really had to like work hard to learn. And you know, trying to
No, you're good.
Hi, sweetie. I love you. You know, relearning those design programs and figuring out how to make them do what I wanted them to do was such a struggle initially. Like that took me so long. Like I was just, you know, it's like when you don't have, it's like you can't even form the question to ask Google.
I am familiar with that experience on a daily basis.
Yeah. It's like, if I only had the words, I'm sure I could find the answer. And I just don't even know how to phrase the question. It was like, there was probably like a year of that until I finally, what were we talking about?
Well, I was asking you what your making process actually is. That's great, because I mean, I feel the same way, and I don't use a lot of computer help in my own work, and every time I have to relearn it, like if I'm in AutoCAD, I'm like, these commands are not intuitive to me. Like this word does not imply this action.
Yeah, I mean, the crazy thing is, like, the more artists I meet, you know, these programs are made to do so many different kinds of things, and every single artist you'll meet like has their own very specific set of tools that they know how to use, and almost none of them know how to use anything aside from the ones they use. It's just so, it's like, am I doing it right? No, but it makes the thing that I want it to make, so it doesn't matter, you know?
Yeah. Well, it would kind of be pointless for us all to try and learn everything. Like if we've developed a set of tools that work for our thing, like you've said, why change?
Yeah, I mean, and there's functionality that like I will never need, you know, like, anyway, this is what this kind of looks like. They're like stacked, layered.
Awesome. So then that gets, when you're doing a screen print, then that gets burned into a screen, and then you're literally running ink, or
so yeah, I have a sort of a printmaking esque process that's now digital. So I draw everything in Indian ink, and that's what, you know, it's kind of what gives it that printmaking feel, is because there's imperfection to how it's stacked, right? It still has that like hand in it. And then all of those get scanned and then colored as a separate step. So I think like actually separating those two things is somehow inherent to what I do. It's like
it is kind of
value-based process, and then a color process that's like totally separate thing.
So the hand part is all in black India ink. And then, cool. Oh man, I'm sort of jealous of that sound. I actually did, I did a wallpaper pattern for my old boss, and it's in her house and in her collection. And I did it with India ink too. So cool. I'm glad to know that that's how the professionals are doing it. Or one of the professionals anyway. Okay, we've gotten a little off track.
Sorry.
No, I'm really glad. Tell me about some of the people that you rely on to get your work finished.
Well, I gotta say, like, my husband does a huge amount of support stuff for me. I think I'm definitely one of those people who, like, left to my own devices, would be eating spoonfuls of peanut butter and popcorn. You know what I mean? Like if no one was paying attention to me.
Yeah.
Or like not going to bed. You know what I mean? That's like an ADHD thing apparently, but like I need a lot of help, like with the basic
things of life.
Yeah. And so I'm really lucky that I have that. I feel yes, I'm very supported that way. I also like, I'm very like emotionally supported that way too. And otherwise, like I have great relationships with my printers.
Okay.
I think I found somebody I liked a long time ago, and they do all my commercial projects. And I think there's something about building a team behind you that I think is really important, especially if you work for yourself. It's like chosen family. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
just having the people that are going to be like, I fully stand behind this person's work. They, you know, like I know they every time do a great job. In fact, this is who I bring with me. And I think I find that clients often like to have the pressure of having those additional choices or responsibilities removed from them. Like they
Yeah.
just want you to be like, oh, you're handling everything. I'm so relieved. Like you, thank you, you know, so that's nice.
And well, I was going to say, because what you're producing ultimately, I think, can be considered a product by the client.
Mhm.
That's super nice. I have done a few projects where I basically sell it that way, where I've handled everything and you're paying me a price and you're going to pay it to me monthly like you're buying a car.
Mhm.
And some clients love that because it's totally hands off. They know it's all happening. And others who want to possibly pick
Itemize.
and choose vendors or itemize,
Right.
they don't like that at all. And so, but I can't make my thing feel like a product in the same way. I think that you maybe can.
Well, I actually don't market market myself as a product based,
Yeah.
you know, like I do sell like residential wallpaper that I design with, you know, that's through Manolo walls that you can just buy off the shelf. But for the most part, like everything I do is fully custom. And so it's
Mhm.
much more, you know, yes, you get a product out of it, but it's a service that has to do
Yeah.
with like me helping you investigate your values, your, you know, like,
Yeah.
and I think at the end of the day, like it's much more of a service oriented business than a product. Like,
Cool. I mean, I think you can look at it and see that that's true. Um, so, but sometimes it's nice to just be able to sell something without all of that.
true. Although like it's weird, you know, like I do a lot of you know, product around this time of year. Like I do a lot of like gift wrap and
Yeah.
other stuff. And, you know, it's like dealing with like the post office got my package wet. Can you replace it? And I'm like, of course.
Have you ever watched 30 Rock?
Yes, but not recently.
Okay, well, it's like my favorite show. I've watched it like 100 times.
Uh-huh.
There's an episode where one of the characters is like, I've never been so offended in my life. And I've been to and worked at the post office. And I mean, that is totally true. That is,
Yeah, it's a mess. People are crazy this time of year too. It's
yeah.
like a
Yeah.
frenzy. It's
Um,
weird.
could you, this wasn't a question that I put in. So if you don't want to discuss it, fine. Could you talk about the pricing of working with you?
Mhm. Like how I price things.
How you price, maybe what your price is, that you don't have to. Uh,
Sorry, I just got a note that was like sandwich.
yes, please.
Yes, please feed me. Remind me to eat. Sorry, how I do it. I'm sorry, I just like blanked
No, that's
completely
okay.
on what you said.
How you do it. Um, like what would it cost me if I wanted to work with you to create a custom, because you know, since our audience is potentially a future client, I would like them to have a sense of what they'd be getting into. Um,
Okay. I mean, it's a broad
okay.
question, but I can kind of
And also, I think that every interior designer would answer, it's a broad question.
yeah,
So,
right. Like I think the mistake you make early on is it's like we're not all selling light bulbs, right?
right.
Like what I do is completely unique to me. And if you want what I do, you pay what I ask for. And it's not based on comparison shopping someone
Yeah.
else's work. Like they ask for what they want and I ask for what I want, and they're
Yeah.
not related.
Yeah.
You know, that being said, like there's for sure a range that people feel comfortable with, like with, you know, a residential client versus a commercial client.
Yeah.
And I think there's a, so my conversations usually revolve around like how complex, how fast, and how much use. So, you know, the person who is a residential client who's like, I'm building a, you know, a retirement home. I've got a long time. It's going to take 2 years. Like, I want to hire you now. And I don't need exclusivity. You know, like you could take this work and sell it. I don't care. I just want something special for my powder room. That client gets priced differently from the person who's like, I have a hotel. There's 9 floors of complex, different, you know, items, and it needs to fit this concept. And it's, you know, and also we want this degree of exclusivity and we want to be able to use it here, here, and here. You know what I mean? Like,
yes. Yeah. 2 totally different clients.
Yeah. And I think, you know, you know, I've kind of priced it as like, there's a design fee that's based around sort of how much time, effort is, you know, research too is put into like actually executing the design. And then there's the, you know, I usually call it like a licensing fee. Like, how many locations are you going to use it? What do you want to use it for? You know, are you, you know, and that's where I have to kind of deliver this, you know, value proposition that's basically about like, you can see that like how much identity I deliver through my work, and how much, like in an age of social media where people like associate images with, you know, your business, like that's what I'm giving you, is like an environmental image that people only associate with your brand, and like that has a huge amount of value. So it kind of depends on the scale of that too.
Yeah.
That didn't answer anything, did it?
No, actually, no, that's incredibly helpful. That is a great answer. And I'm sorry to have put you on the spot with that question. I was just,
you know, people ask me that all the time. So it's a kind of a stock. I do answer that a lot. So.
Yeah. Yes, unfortunately, it's something we all have to answer eventually.
Right. I think, you know, the key is a little bit to, you know, to really own the idea that you are the expert of your own work.
Yeah.
You know,
I wonder if the person who designed the carpet at the Portland airport realized how distinctively they would have been branding that place. I hope they're collecting royalties.
I doubt it though, you know?
I doubt it. I'm sure they're not.
I mean, you haven't asked this question yet, but I was going to say, like, when I started out, I tried to go for the licensing direction first, because that's how a lot of artists
do it.
Art, yeah. Like if you want to do commercial art, you either like make, I mean, it's like you either are the person who makes the giant paintings to get sourced to put in the, like by designers to put in an apartment building,
right. Yeah.
Or you make, you know, work that gets licensed to put on product. And oh my God, I just lost it.
Well, I actually had not put a question in there about licensing, and I'm glad that you brought it up, because I think that used to be like a sure thing for people. Like, this is definitely going to be a lucrative direction. And
but also anonymous.
Yes, you can't. I think it's lucrative in that someone else is handling it all and you get a cut, but you can't really build yourself up in the same way.
Well, I think traditionally, I mean, it's unfortunate, but someone who was a textile designer, for example, like 40 years ago, would have been cranking out incredible artwork that never had their name on it. And I think also, like, it was so much more trend dependent and so much more, you know, especially because a lot of that stuff is going to be mass produced. It's so like broad, you know, like talk about niche. Like the advice that I got in the beginning when I started was like, your color palettes are too unconventional. You need more of this type of work. I actually went to a licensing show in New York, and like the feedback I got was like, you know, if I had a bird in one of my pieces, they'd be like, I wish it was a cardinal. And I'm like, why? For you in Virginia or whatever? Like, I'm not making work for you, but like, that's what, like,
I mean, that's like the worst advice to listen to, I think. Be more like everybody else.
I think that it does work for some people, but it's like a false, really small percentage. Like I just rejected that so hard that I went like completely in the opposite direction. I was like, excuse me, you know, like I'm gonna do the most specific work. Like they'd be like, oh, we have so many florals, like it's easy to do florals. Like a floral is a floral. And I'm like, if you're drawing a flower that looks like a daisy and you can't tell me what kind of daisy it is, then I don't care about your work, is like how I sort of felt. Like I got really into, you know, like I'm really into gardening, and I, you know, it was like, a floral is not a floral. Like it's so specific. Like, why not be more specific? I don't want to just like draw like unidentifiable flowers. Who cares, you know? Anyway. I went off there, sorry.
Decorating a nursing home. Okay, what else do I need to ask you before I let you go eat your sandwich?
We were going to talk about favorite project, maybe.
Yeah. Tell me about some of your favorite or one of your favorite projects. And also, definitely, I want to know about your least favorite project. We will, of course, keep it anonymous, but yeah.
Okay, so favorite projects. You know, the State Hotel was kind of like my career making project. And amazingly,
where is the State Hotel?
It's in Seattle. It's on 2nd and Pike. So it's like a block from Pike Place Market. So the concept was this, you know, level by level Pike Place referencing, you know, design. So it's, you know, it's all about like the sort of the detritus from the market. So like, have you been to the basement of Pike Place?
Maybe.
There's like some really weird stuff down there, you know, like there's some, I think that the city has some rent control on those spaces, so that they do allow like really interesting businesses to be in Pike Place Market, which is what makes it so special. Like there's a, you know, a Chinese restaurant that's been there forever. There's a weird thrift store. There's like an Egypt import store and like a Polish import store, and like
it does make it a lot more fun.
A head shop, and like, of course, you know, like there's all kinds of, you know, street musicians. And I think, you know, part of what was really fun for me was like proposing this huge list of stuff and like being able to combine it in all these different ways. And I had like 9 variations, 9 colorways. Like I got to propose exactly what I wanted to do and like lead how I wanted to, with like very minimal actual, you know, they like guided me rather than told me what to do. And I got recommended to do it by the, you know, the graphic designers who were hired to work on the project, and they like sold me to the team, which was amazing. Yeah, so that was really fun. I liked the people, Gato Gato and Oma's. This is the Oma's wallpaper back here.
Okay. I'm not familiar with Oma's.
It's their second restaurants on Division and like 38th.
Okay.
So, I mean, I don't know, I could go a couple different ways with this, but like, you know, one is that I really have their trust, you know, so if I want to do something and think something's a really cool idea, they are totally on board to let me like do what I want to do. But they're also people that are like Tom is the kind of chef that's doing like, he's just got so much creativity. It's like he's, and Mariah's got so much like eclectic style. Like they just have so much heritage and so many like interesting things to know about them. And they're just such like great people and so like supportive of the community, and they just do such cool stuff that it's just a joy to make work for them.
That's great. Making the process joyful is really important, I think.
Yes. Worst projects.
Yes.
So, I mean, this goes along with what I was saying earlier about like learning the sort of professional development stuff about learning to like bring your client along. I had this project that like kind of died at the beginning of the pandemic for a another like food service restaurant type business that it's like, don't you feel like you get a lot better as you go in like learning what the red flags are?
Yes, I still don't always pay attention to them, but yes.
Yeah. I would say like early on in my career, I was really focused on if someone was like, here, I have this problem, I'd be like, oh, I can solve your problem.
Yeah.
And rather than, and I think this is like a, you know, I swear I've talked to my therapist more about this than, because it's like applies so much to like
everything else,
being a person. Yeah. That like, it's like, if you're focused on like, oh, I can solve your problem versus am I the right person to solve the problem?
Yeah.
Like, have I really listened to you actually? Rather than being so eager, you know?
Yeah, it's the eagerness. I think this seems to be, I wouldn't say universal, but a pretty strong trait that runs within people in our field is this eagerness, as you said, to problem solve. And I think you're totally right. You have to listen and think, do they want the solution that you could provide?
Right.
And if they don't, you have to say no.
You assume that, oh, you know, like one, I think it's really easy to assume that since we do something visual or we do something experiential, that the work speaks for itself.
Right.
But it's so not true. Like, in fact, the degree to which somebody really understands what you do, like that you can't assume that they have, even if they gush all over you about, I love everything you do, you still might be mishearing what they actually want.
Yeah.
And I think like you can't really like, oh, but if you've seen my work, you know what you're going to get. But in reality,
no,
they still have these expectations that if you haven't listened, you could totally mess it up anyway.
Right. And so this project that was terrible.
Yeah, they wanted, you know, ultimately I had turned in like some sketches and the sketches were super rough, right? Like crayon, basically, like really rough. And like, we went from the crayon drawing to like the fully executed design. And this is my thing. And like at the time I was really lacking in these presentation skills where like I wasn't really getting their buy-in. So when I was like, ta-da, here's the finished thing, they were like, we liked the sketch better. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I was never going to give you a crayon drawing. Like you've seen what I do. How could that, like, I was baffled. And I think it turned out that they wanted something that was like much more childlike, much more or kid friendly, and much more like cartoonish. And to me, the fact that I was never going to deliver something like that would have been so obvious that like I thought it would go without saying. But in reality, those were red flags I should have like caught and said like, stop, I'm not the right artist for you.
I can't tell you the number of people I've worked with who I don't think have ever seen my work. And like, don't think to check that out.
Right.
Because they should,
We're all the
because
same.
they can sense where we're gonna go.
Right.
Happily, most of the time it has turned out just fine, but it can be bad.
Yeah.
Okay, I have two more questions I want to ask you, and I know we're coming up against an hour. I'd like if you could give some advice to a person who's hoping to do what you do.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be, well, it should be good advice, but it true. No.
Yes. Okay. Well, one is, I think I sort of said this earlier, is that, I took a really meandering path because I could never have visualized this I couldn't have gotten there from here. You know what I mean? Like here
Yeah.
from there, whatever. So I think, accepting somebody's prescribed map may not necessarily work for you if you are somebody who is not good at following a map and also wants to not be told what to do. If you want to work for yourself and find a way to be uniquely of service, you're really going to have to do the work to figure out what makes you different. And I think that involves really digging into the things that make you weird, or I'm so surprised over and over again that every time I share some weird detail about myself, or something I'm into that it's I'm embarrassed.
Yeah.
I'm really into this thing, and people show up for you. You know what I mean? And you find that because in reality, if you charge what you're worth, and you work with people who value the work you do and you value theirs, and and then you'll find people who only want you.
Yeah.
And really care about working with just you, and those relationships, even if they are, you get half the work but you charge what it's worth.
Yeah.
And and you can make a sustainable practice out of that. It's such a more, to me, there's so much more value in creating that kind of life than trying to say, especially if you come from a background of any kind of customer service or industry type of work, where you think you have some kind of obligation to say yes to everyone who asks you to do something for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a huge amount of personal boundary setting that has to happen, and
Yeah.
self-acceptance.
Yes. Yep.
Those things.
Well, I had one more question, but I actually feel like you just summed everything up really nicely there. And so I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time. It has been a delight to get to know you and your work.
Likewise.
And yeah, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
everybody go look at Kate Blairstone's website. Actually, sorry, I have one more question. Who did your website? Did you? I mean, it's fabulous.
Yeah. Her name is Michelle Joliffe Casas. She just got married, so her name might be different now.
Okay.
But, yeah, they also do my newsletter, her and her business partner, Joyce. And I mean, yeah, this is the other thing, I would say about getting people, if you're trying to level up,
Yeah.
find yourself a really awesome creative attorney.
Yeah.
And as soon as you can, stop trying to think that just because you're a designer that you can and should design everything yourself. Go find people who are
Do that.
top at what they do, and invest in creating those relationships where people are gonna you're gonna bring up other people, and they're gonna bring you up by the quality of their work.
I think that's great advice. I think we all are inclined to try to wear all the hats all the time, and it eventually is stupid.
Yep. Well, it's abundance mindset,
Yeah.
or scarcity.
Yep.
Whatever. Yeah.
I know what you're saying.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Kate, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.